Good evening and welcome to another art stream with myself, Pharaoh, and my co-host for this evening, Mr. Not So Obvious. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Pharaoh. It's amazing how your voice drops about 2 octaves when you switch into on-stream mode.
It's my kind of smooth, jazz, easily listening voice for the night time, you see, so...
I keep expecting you to go and say something along the lines of, people have always asked me why I don't get this audible chocolate on the airwave.
Yeah, no, exactly. Okay, cool. So what we're here to talk about tonight is another theatre review. And after the success of the last one with Simon Roberts, I thought it'd be a great opportunity to talk about something else that I had booked tickets for long in advance early last year, and that is Punch Drunk's The Burnt City. So this is just a short, cozy stream talking through some of their of what they were up to, basically. So and I was lucky enough to bring NSO along for the ride. So what we're going to do is just do a little brief synopsis of the play and give our recommendations to see whether you should make the effort to go. But Mark, what was your initial reaction to hearing about the play, and what's your kind of general theatre knowledge level, would you say, and kind of experience level?
So I'm definitely coming into this very much as a novice. I once read the Iliad when I was about 14 or 15 years old. I remember it being a bit of a slog, and I have retained virtually nothing. But I was offered the opportunity to go and see this piece of modern theatre. It's a bit different to regular theatre in the sense that it's very involved. It's a lot of walking around. It's a whole live performance, and we'll get into sort of what that entails in a bit, I'm sure. But the title of the piece is "The Burnt City," and that kind of immediately grabbed my attention. Definitely. Obviously, I was expecting something a bit more focused around the conflict at Troy, but the actual production seemed to be made up of 3 stories, I would say, realistically, and the various characters within. So they all have their own story. So I was intrigued. I was looking forward to it. It was what I expected in terms of the performance. But when I say in terms of the performance, I mean in the way that it was delivered. But I was surprised and generally like quite impressed with the whole scope of the project. I definitely felt like if you didn't go with friends, certainly on afterwards, if you hadn't gone with friends, you would have missed so much of it that you'd have to come back for a second time. Perhaps that's their business model. They want people to come back a second time.
It's weirdly social and antisocial. But before we dive into the details, I just wanted to give a little bit more of a preamble to the theatre group and the play itself. And like Mark said, it has that very cool name, The Burnt City. And this is sort of what initially caught my interest as a bit of a classicist, or certainly interested in that time period. I brought up they had a little microsite for it, and this is the kind of introduction here. Amidst the moments surrounding the fall of Troy, a mythical world of gods and mortals arises from the ashes. As Greece teeters on the brink of victory, the neon back streets of downtown Troy give way to a sprawling labyrinth hiding secrets even the prophecies could not foretell. In this colossal foreground, the Furies watch on as mortals play out their fate. And as night falls, the city comes alive one last time. Yeah, I mean, that's a great bit of copy there. Whoever wrote that definitely deserves a promotion. Now, just for those of you who don't know, if you end up in any kind of theatre circles, you'll have heard of this group, Punch Drunk. So most plays are organised through a theatre usually, so that they'll commission, or they'll have like a director on retainer, or commission someone to come in, and it will be organised by the theatre themselves. Now, you can certainly for more of the West Endy kind of places have touring theatre groups or production groups, and for small independents, you tend to have them as well. And one of the more famous is Punch Drunk. They've been around for the last 15 years, I believe, and they have a certain reputation for larger scale productions, stuff that's a little bit outside of the box, and also for stuff that, as NSO alluded to, is a bit more sort of interactive slash. It's not you sitting down in an amphitheater somewhere. It's you taking a stroll through different scenes. And so I'd heard about them many years ago from some acting friends of mine. Well, they weren't actors. They're not actors anymore, but who tried to make it and ultimately didn't. And they were very had like thought it was like a mixed bag, and so I was quite keen to see what they had to offer. But the previous plays were kind of quite obtuse, and so when this came around, I thought it was the perfect time to take a look. I'll bring up some of the pictures now. The one thing that's interesting with these guys is the amount of kind of press and build up is very, very minimal, because they have a brand name. They actually I don't know if I mentioned this, Mark. The space that we went to is actually owned by them as well. So
yes, first production in their newly acquired digs.
Yeah, but they were very kind of quiet with their press and don't give much information away. So normally you would have like a cast list with names of people. So this person's playing this person, and you'd have loads of images and maybe some pre-press in the Guardian or the Telegraph or the Stage, etc. But all there really was is these kind of small 7 images across here. These kind of rather obtuse images that. Yes, exactly. So again, that kind of got my interest. So I thought like give you guys a bit of a show of the different images. So that was kind of like the build up. So it's this classic Troy based interactive play is what I had in my head coming into it. Now, Mark, do you want to just talk about the space itself? So is in Woolwich, kind of southeast London, isn't it? So
yeah, and basically, again, you know nothing going in. Are you talking? Do you mean want to talk about the area or the space inside?
Yeah, just maybe the actual area and the building as well, because it was
the building itself is 300 square feet. So it's quite large, and they make use of the space very well. It has this kind of setting of a mixture of pre-built sets. So it's tunnels and corridors and big spaces. They had like an entire facade of an entire street, and various different places to go. It really did feel like you were in the back streets of some city. And all of these pieces are also from various different time periods. There was a lot of kind of imagery. There was only one section which was, I would say, close to the time period, although it was more of a kind of spiritual, sort of almost cave-like arena. And then the rest of it is quite industrial. So there's a lot of kind of sort of graffiti and sort of, I don't know how to describe it other than what I would picture like 90s scummy New York would look like. And then the rest of it was kind of 20s, 1910s, 1920s, sort of.
Yeah, you can sort of see from here like the kind of outfits they were going for. So it was that kind of like interwar theme, maybe, like 20s style. Now just explain. So like Mark said, the space had different areas that you could venture into, but coming in was kind of interesting because you were sort of herded into a series of exhibition spaces. So it was kind of almost like a faux museum, and you'd enter into each room, but you also were given what I can only describe as kind of like a Venetian carnival mask. Now, if you look in the background here, these kind of people looking on, this is a live one of the scenes happening, and these are genuine people watching the production. So everyone had their own masks on, no one was allowed to talk, and your mobile phones were taken away from you. So it was kind of a novel experience to be cut off from devices and technology, but also from your friends, because it was quite hard to keep track of everyone who everyone was. And after the kind of series of exhibitions, you were sort of kind of cast out into this space. So what was your initial reaction, Mark, as you sort of went through the doors into the sort of play itself, so to speak?
So just stepping back a little bit, so in this intro area where you're handed your masks, there are a set of exhibitions which kind of lay out the basics of the story, what different characters have done and what they are going to do. And these were kind of brought to life by different items that then showed up as part of the production, which was really nice. And the last display case was also broken. I believe when I spoke to someone that was kind of meant to infer this idea of history coming alive. And actually, as much as because there were a lot of people there, I would estimate like 300 or so sort of participants who are looking on, people who'd paid to be there. Sorry. And this idea that you're kind of these silent watchers, like invisible watchers, was very it worked really well. I thought that was one of the strong points. I really didn't feel like the production was taken away from by the fact that there were so many people watching at all different corners, because everyone has the same face. And then you have this, you finish the gallery, and one of it's like the last thing that one of the production team says is basically, go in, don't talk, but in dramatic kind of stage voice.
I mean, again, they should have promoted that girl, because she was hamming it up like there was no tomorrow. It was a great moment. She was like, she had 2 minutes of talking time, and she was going to make people know that she was an aspiring actress.
Yeah, it was quite funny. The full like emphasis on opening the mouth nice and wide. But the so you then leave. You go through some doors, and you're in. As I say, the area which is the closest to sort of the time period that you'd expect this whole thing to be set in, that being ancient Greece. And there's all of these curtains, and it feels like you're in a big tent with lots and lots of drapes around, which are all kind of covering again different items and exhibits from the time period. And again, at the further you move in, the more modern they become. And there's also this kind of sense of, this is the first point at which you can break off. There's clearly a really established path, and there's only one exit into the main production, but there's loads of exhibits kind of tucked away. I don't know if you did this, Pharaoh, but I went back in and had a look around during one of the quiet points during the production, and found loads of stuff that I wasn't expecting.
So because the first little, so again, I want people to imagine the closest thing I can imagine to it was like a quasar or a laser quest. This kind of huge sprawling expanse.
It's very dark as well. Yeah.
Yeah, very dark, but with different zones in, like the Crystal Maze or something. So that first zone, I thought, again, you have to sort of like interpret what a space is by the objects. So I thought it was like the archaeologists dig, where again, like you said, there was different finds. There was lots of different analysis going on, but also I thought it could maybe be like the kind of plans of attack for Troy is what I was initially thinking. But like you said, so you went back and took a look later, and what did you find?
Various bits and pieces. Like it very clearly goes from like old coins and old games into like poker sets and sort of, as I say, these 1910, 1920 like old wooden sort of cabinets and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of detail in there with a lot of items, but so it's not just like a cabinet standing by itself. It'll be there. It'll have a mirror. It'll have makeup stuff on it and stuff like that. But as I say, once you've been around the actual exhibitions, those items start to make a lot more sense because they feature more heavily as part of the production. And then once you've finished sort of going through this, you've been shuffling through with a huge kind of not crowd of people, but a big line of people. You come out into this initial space, which was dominated by two enormous anti-tank barricades. So they're set quite far apart from one another, and there's a lot of sand beneath them, and it really throws you directly into the production. I walked straight in. There are immediately 3 soldiers, as we thought at that point, in again World War I dress, making their way across the set to one area, and lots of people would then have the opportunity to follow them. And then I lost them very quickly. They moved off very, very quickly. Did you follow them the first time?
Yes. So I guess kind of like my game plan in my head was to because I'd heard about the fact you need to basically follow people around. So again, this isn't like a normal play where everything is kind of presented nicely on a plate. You sort of have to hunt out the stories, and it's a bit like pick your own adventure as well, where you can kind of follow individual people or try and follow a story, etc. So in my head, they gave no clue to the kind of plot line or the story beforehand, but they had referenced Iphigenia. Maybe it's worth just doing a quick synopsis of the whole of the Iliad just quickly for 5 minutes, if you'll be patient with me, NSO, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Yeah. So obviously the whole play is based around the kind of Homeric epic of the fall of Troy. But one thing you need to appreciate is that and that's the Iliad, but the Iliad is the beginning point for so many kind of Greek sub-stories and theatrical pieces that it's kind of like the main arc, and then you've got all of these different stories that come off the back that are then explored in different theatre, like different plays, and also different writing. So I believe they've traced back Homer's poem to kind of like a pre Greek city-state existence, so almost like the Mycenaeans, who are the kind of proto-Greek people, and it ultimately tells the story of Helen of Troy, who is stolen away by Paris, who uses the god's powers Aphrodite's power to steal her away to Troy. Now, Paris was the wife of Menelaus. Now you got to remember that the Mycenaeans are a collection of city kingdoms loosely banded together. Menelaus is the brother of Agamemnon, the leader of the Mycenaeans, and so being annoyed at the theft of his brother's wife, he organizes war and collects a group of elite soldiers to come together, including famous names like Odysseus and Achilles and Ajax and many others. And long and the short of it is, through Odysseus's cunning and Achilles' strength, they win and conquer the city. And you'd think that's that, but there are a whole load of stories. That's mainly what the Iliad covers. But there's a whole load of stories, like following, like from the fallout of that main play. You've got the Odyssey, which is all about Odysseus's journey back home. You've got the Trojan Women, which is a play about the plight of the women of Troy after the fall of Troy. It's kind of like there's a lot of lamenting. If you like lamenting, check out that play. There is, and then there is the play Iphigenia, which is about the sacrifice of Iphigenia to the gods. And so Agamemnon, the leader of the Mycenaeans, who are the Proto-Greeks, he gets the gang together in Greece, but is blocked by the gods by unfavorable winds. And so it's worked out that they need to perform a sacrifice of one of his children, basically. And he ends up killing one of his daughters called Iphigenia. Now, his wife, Clytemnestra, is not too happy at that. And while he's off at the Trojan War, she finds herself a lover and eventually plots for her husband's demise. And essentially that is the plot line, and Agamemnon is done in. And that's the kind of very rushed plot of Iphigenia. There is also the play the Hecuba, which is all about the story of the Queen of Troy as well. But I didn't know too much about that at the start. So like I was relatively versed in with the Iliad. I've seen the Trojan Women before. I saw a production in Brooklyn actually, which was terrible for that. Sorry, Americans. And also, I'd seen a production of the Orestia. So following on from Iphigenia, there's like a follow-up sequel to that, where Agamemnon's son, Orestia, then goes on like a killing spree to kill his mother, as well, in kind of revenge for the revenge killing, if that makes sense. So this is what I'm saying, that there's so much kind of like source material to draw from, and also it's a huge cast of characters. So when I initially saw the guys in great coats, I was thinking, okay, this is it. It's going to be Agamemnon and like some of the gang, basically. So I made this decision to follow them. Did you mention about who was on one of the tank traps?
No, I was gonna come on to that.
Yes.
Because so I lost track of Agamemnon and co. Whilst Ferro went off to that, and I noticed that there was this character, this woman lying on the lying on one of the tank traps, and that was clearly Iphigenia. Is that right?
Or Iphigenia. There is
Iphigenia,
debate as to the pronunciation.
And when things had started, I don't know if I had missed things. I don't think so. I think she starts the production up there, and essentially I was like, well, what's going on here? And there's this whole sequence then of her being taken down by this kind of unknown figure, and taken into a back area and resurrected. And it's, again, we should mention the whole performance is done in a very contemporary style. So it's a lot of arm waving and bold kind of expressive dance, which is very, it's the quintessential kind of contemporary style. So
there was only two characters that I could hear speak, and partly that was because there was this kind of quite like that they used. I would describe it as a musical soundscape to tell you, like, to guide you a little bit about some of the bigger moments that are going on, so you could hear some of the stuff happen. Like they, you know what I'm saying, they synced up to the music. But the downside of the music being so loud was some of the actors did try and speak, but they speak very, very quietly, so you could hear if you got really close to them. And some of them spoke in Greek as well. I don't know if you noticed that at all.
I didn't catch the Greek speaking, but I think the whispering or that kind of volume was very deliberate anyway.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to be more evocative than informative. So there's a scene where Iphigenia is having been resurrected, is now for some reason in like the 1910s. And she's being spoken to by a couple of other characters in a dressing room where she's getting changed between various different costumes. And, a lot of it's quite banal about the scene. Do you like this dress? Do you like this? And setting up, various characters taking away older clothes and different set pieces as well, which presumably then get filtered back into the main production. It was very slick, I have to say, in terms of the transition of items which needed to be in a specific place at a specific time, and the circular nature of things. I suppose we should mention the circular nature.
Yes, please do. Please talk about that.
So the entire production is actually done 3 times, and each production time is roughly 1 hour. So every character that you follow will go through a whole series of events and end up back where they started, and then the whole thing begins again, and it goes around twice more, and then there's a finale at the end where everyone kind of gets together and is guided back into that main tank trap space where there's a big finale, which we won't spoil for now, but yeah.
Yes, so just on that, obviously with the kind of cyclical nature of things, that they tried to pull in some kind of overarching themes across the board. Obviously, when you kind of study the Iliad, you hear about the Homeric cycle. So I do wonder whether that's where some of the initial ideas came together. But this kind of cyclical nature of the story allows you to experience. So just imagine one gigantic play going on with about 60 different people across a gigantic space over the course of an hour, which then manages to loop around back to the start again. So they'll have things set up so people that they kind of begin the whole thing again. So what's great about that is you could kind of explore it from one way and then say, oh, okay, I want a different person's viewpoint. So one thing I would say with the Iphigenia story, because I saw that second time round, so I followed Agamemnon firstly, then I followed Hecuba, but then I got lost, and I'll talk more about that later.
Yeah,
and then I ended up on the Iphigenia trail, and so I did see some of it, but they basically do play fast and loose a little bit with some of the source material. And again, like if you are a hardcore kind of classics nerd and a bit of a purist, this is definitely not for you, because obviously they do away with a lot of the kind of formal structures of the Greek plays. So again, things like whenever you talk about Greek theatre, you think about the chorus as a kind of key element to that, and it's all about the interaction between different characters and the chorus. That's a huge element. There is no chorus; that's all been done away with. It's about individual characters. So with the Iphigenia's plotline, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe this is some kind of niche story that I'm not familiar with. She is not normally resurrected,
No.
But they did a quite faithful interpretation of Iphigenia being summoned to be sacrificed, and in the play, she's kind of, because they're all on different islands, the kind of Greek archipelago style. Clytemnestra is with Iphigenia on one island, and Agamemnon's trying to get Iphigenia over to kill her, basically, and he lures her over with a promise of marriage to Achilles. So this great honor.
Yeah.
So sorry.
Yeah, so they do this really nice thing sort of after the resurrection, so to speak, when her story essentially begins again, and that's where you see basically her flirtation with the chap who's supposed to be playing Achilles. At least that's what I interpreted it as. She has this whole thing, and where she's taking him around the streets. In fact, if you go back a couple of images on the Punch Drunk site there, you can see.
Just to say, this is the woman who played Iphigenia.
Yes, and the chap she's dancing with there is the chap I'm talking about as well. She has this whole flirtation with him. She meets him in one of the bars. I think it's one more back there. In this sort of this sort of space next down in front of this big theatrical theatre. I think it's sort of like this Italian bar.
Again, just think about different zones like the Crystal Maze. The main you've got this kind of like big hall. There's kind of like these big lofty halls which represents. My Mycenae, and then you've got basically like the town centre. There's like a square with lots of shops on and stuff. So this is in the town centre zone.
Mm. And she finds him in the bar, and she flirts with him, and then they head off on a kind of wild ride of like dancing through the streets, ending up in different locations, and then basically he is sort of symbolically sacrificed on the second tank trap, which is really interesting. Kind of the death of that relationship, because he doesn't actually die. He just she's symbolically sacrifices that. And
well,
he,
sorry. I
yeah.
was wondering whether it was like foreshadowing the death of Achilles later as well. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And he basically has to be removed anyway, because otherwise he would play into the story with Agamemnon later, because he gets very angry with Agamemnon. I didn't follow him enough. I don't know whether or not he had a scene with Agamemnon where they have an argument. But
no, basically.
Yeah, so they go off on a dance. The interesting thing about that was they intersect with a whole load of other stories. So there was an opportunity to basically pair off and go and follow other people as you're going around, as these two people are sort of dancing raucously and having a great time. And then she ends up coming back to her mother's house, and then is treated to sort of girly discussion, I suppose, and changes for the next day, etc., where he's bought her this nice robe and stuff like that. They take that off her and take her away, and she goes to bed, and then she disappears through another door, and you have to go and find someone else to follow, which I found you're kind of left adrift at that point.
There's a couple of troll moments where, again, you try your best to follow people, but there are spaces that are locked off from people, and you can't follow them behind. There are spaces that are only opened at certain times, so you need to know when to kind of go into those spaces and not as well. So there's nothing worse than one of the characters just disappearing, because it's really that's I think one of my big criticisms about the kind of
the flow,
or the genre of play itself, is that you need a bit of luck, if that makes sense. You need to be lucky enough to find someone that you can latch onto to get a good story, because once you're lost, I found it very, very difficult. But anyway, we can talk more about that at the end. But one thing to mention is that I'm pretty sure that all of the Iphigenia backstory happens like after her death, because she had basically like a red outfit and a white outfit, and I think when it was the red outfit, that was representing her shade or her spirit or whatever.
Okay.
So I did wonder if they did it like that, but again, that's just my interpretation. So
yeah, and her story kind of goes from that point. She appears later at the killing of Agamemnon, kind of briefly, and then heads back down to. She gets led back down to the tank trap, and there's this whole elaborate sequence where Agamemnon reappears and then has that kind of climactic moment where he sacrifices her on top of the tank trap, and her story has come full circle, and then it begins again.
Yeah, so I would say like the Iphigenia story is one of the main attractions, and again, like that's possibly like the major normie story, if that makes sense. If you were, sorry.
Yeah, from a novice perspective, it was certainly the easiest to follow.
Yeah, and I think the most famous as well. So it's kind of like, and I'd say initially that's where the majority of the people kind of followed along with, was the Iphigenia story, and I thought actually it was really well done, very, very powerful.
I got chills the second time. Actually, I got more chills watching it from further away, from up on one of the balconies, because it's quite a vertical performance as well.
Interesting, yeah. Yeah, and again, I think that's what's quite good. Is like you could even see the same thing 3 times, but from different viewpoints, and you would notice different things. And again, just to Mark's point, you have different characters coming in and out, different symbolic figures. And so one thing I started to notice was there was a couple of figures that wouldn't stay in any one scene; they would kind of flitter between the two. And I'll talk more about that later. So that's the first kind of like main plot line. The second one I think is the Agamemnon Clytemnestra revenge storyline. Yes. And as Mark said, I sort of went off after Iphigenia had been sacrificed, and he goes all the way across to Troy, and they represented kind of that kind of town square with the shops in as Troy. But again, I think you have to be, because they have to use several spaces over and over again, like you have to be a little bit careful that they're not too definite about spaces, apart from Mycenae, which literally has like a passport office going into it. So I think that's the only definite space. Everything else gets used a couple of times for different people.
Yeah, because they definitely take that. The main square was all concrete, and they use it as the staging ground for him meeting with the natives, sort of that native tribe, where one of his men kills the princess. I can't remember the exact the myth that they're drawing from there, but it causes a lot of strife. He has to flee, and they do this whole elaborate set piece where she's died, and then she's hoisted up topless, as it turns out, sort of by the feet by this chap with very strong arms, who's like hoisting away in the background one of the staff, where she's suspended, like hung upside down, her corpse covered in blood, after he flees. I was kind of a bit sort of lost at this point. Agamemnon heads on.
I can tell you the storyline for this. So this is actually so one thing to note as well. They basically ignore the whole Trojan War. So you have the kind of the death of Iphigenia, which again is sort of like the beginning of the war itself, really, in the Iliad. But then they sort of skip ahead, and basically during that journey from Mycenae to the other like town hall space, everything else has happened. So it's kind of zooming forward in time. And the moment you described is actually the we sort of come up to the beginning of the play Hecuba, where basically they decide, the Greeks have captured all of the Trojan women. They're all slaves, and they decide that they should sacrifice one of Hecuba's and Polymestra, so the king and queen of Troy, hit their one of their daughters in a sacrifice to like Achilles' shade. So it's kind of like an offering to the spirit of Achilles. So you see the scene of Hecuba. So Hecuba is one of the few people that again is on the picture list. If I zoom back across here.
She was the short-haired, red-haired woman, wasn't she?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. You see her and her 3 daughters kind of like mourning, and there's obviously some kind of trade going on. And then Polydorus, sort of like she has this like hair thrashing thing. It's quite funny. She kind of like dances around Agamemnon and throws her hair upon him, and then, as I said, yeah, is strung up. So this basically then starts another storyline that you can follow if you stay with Hecuba and the Trojans, basically. But Agamemnon then races off with another of his daughters, and you may be familiar with the character of Cassandra, famous for being able to prophesy but never having anyone believe who she is. And she was actually offered as a concubine to Agamemnon. And so you then see the transference of this kind of sparkly diamond crown, and Agamemnon, Cassandra run off into the different labyrinth and tunnels. So you've got the beginning of another story, and then you can keep on following Agamemnon to follow his story. Did you go after Agamemnon at this point, or did you get lost? Did you say?
No, so I followed Hecuba at this point. So if you carry on with Agamemnon's journey.
Yeah, sure. And so you basically go through a whole load of tunnels. He kind of has like a little flashlight. It's very, very dark, and you get the impression that he's almost kind of like making his journey home. And again, if you know anything about the Odyssey, it's a treacherous way back home, and not many of the Greek soldiers made it back, basically. But there's kind of like a couple of interesting scenes where Agamemnon and Clytemnestra are kind of like dancing around together. There's like a mysterious figure with like long ginger hair and like a blue fluorescent marker kind of dances alongside Agamemnon and smears blood on this kind of window. So maybe a bit of foreshadowing. I don't know if it's reference to a specific god or a curse or whatever, but that happens. And then basically he ends up finally making his way back to Mycenae, the Mycenaean Hall. And because I think Cassandra sort of disappears in the background, she's basically forgotten about. And he's given this amazing cloak. Did you see? Were you there for the cloak?
The giant purple cloak, yes.
Yes.
It literally was about 50 feet long. They have this enormous table, and it's just as long as the table. And you cannot go up the stairs whilst he's going up the stairs because he basically has this enormous train going behind him. Yeah,
that does remind me. Another downside of this kind of quite free flowing viewing format is that often you can be placed in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so several people have put themselves on the stairs to look down, were quickly shoved aside by several of the kind of quite rough-handed actors. I felt at sometimes, like give us a break here a bit, please, because we have no idea where we're meant to be.
They're very much method acting, playing the character. These watchers, they don't actually exist. We're just going to do our thing and barge through, basically.
Yeah, like the soldiers. Whenever you see the pictures of the soldiers around the palace or whatever, like marching over people and stuff, you get in their way. I felt like it was a bit like that. But
I think, the only real interactive moment, I would say, where like they got, because various characters as you go along will take the hands of onlookers and sort of guide them into the scenes. It's all, as I say, like quite minor. But there was a scene where Agamemnon is like ushering everyone through these tunnels and making everyone run, and it's literally just hand on back, shove you down the corridor.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah, it is like that. They also don't make it that easy to follow certain people as well. So you have you have to constantly run around, and also you have to be aware of boomers because they literally act as blockers. You just got to be absolutely savage and shove them aside, which was quite fun actually in some ways.
Yes,
I enjoyed that.
Deeply enjoyed these faceless people I got to shove out of the way.
Yeah. So anyway, Agamemnon gets back. He's kind of granted like this kind of royal celebration, and is kind of brought up into the main area where he meets his wife Clytemnestra,
and her lover, who's wearing a bald cap and a mask.
I got to find a picture of this because it was horrible. The picture, I did see it somewhere online basically, but did you see like what happened in the hall? You were there for that, weren't you? So they arrive and they basically make love on the
table.
On the table, basically. But you talk through what happened next while I try and find a photo of that.
So there's this whole sort of really strangely kind of bisexual sort of intercourse where his wife is going between him and her lover, who's wearing this awful bald cap, and eventually they basically make their way down the table. This table is again about 50 feet long, so it's enormous.
I have a picture.
There we go. Yeah, there you are. So they're lying together, being observed by this guy. And eventually it kind of coalesces at the end. He gets up and he's going to take a shower. They had this sort of this open end at one side with an open shower. So he literally strips off completely naked and heads over there and starts taking a shower where he's sort of caressed and lathered up and looked after by his wife and this guy. And then, of course, at the moment, the kind of climactic moment, she kills him in the shower and murders him. And he's visited at that point by the spirit of his daughter, who he's very happy to see. And then he dies, basically. That's his thing. And then they do basically a quick change where sort of everything's resetting. So he gets back into his military uniform and then escorts Iphigenia back down to the tank trap to enact the sacrifice again, which kicked everything off.
Yeah, there's a few funny moments because, again, situational wise, I'd positioned myself right in the shower. So I was like, uh-oh, they're coming right for me. So I literally just ran out of the way. There's some quite clever lighting design where they kind of light up different areas to highlight areas or to kind of guide you to check out different bits. So you can either fight against it or go with the flow. The nudity was something, again, it's just like I mentioned this with Simon in the last review, where it's just a classic theatre thing now. It's not a play unless someone gets their.
It's just sort of there,
count. It's just it's so unnecessary and gross. But anyway, I thought the whole kind of Clytemnestra coming back scene was weird and creepy, and especially because of that third guy, and they had the lover there, and I guess it's to represent him kind of being close by, and that's who she's thinking of, because Clytemnestra's having to have sex with her husband that she hates, and she's dreaming of the lover or whatever. So I
have this moment where he pulls off the bald cap and reveals himself and shocks Agamemnon, and then she kind of essentially has made her decision, and that's when she cuts his throat.
Yeah. Now I couldn't help, but as soon as we mentioned Clytemnestra, one of my favourite paintings of the 19th century is this masterpiece by John Collier, depicting the scene of Clytemnestra after she's killed Agamemnon. And I just wanted to kind of bring this up. This is an art show, so it's really worth checking out. This in the traditional depictions, he is actually killed when he's bathing. So I don't know if you can see this. This is a low quality image. You have to look it up yourself. But this is a bath, and you can see Agamemnon's hand sticking out. So this is Clytemnestra revealing her deed to the world. This kind of brazen woman, and you can see the kind of blood seeping out from her axe and on the floor across here. It's just a real badass picture, and really, really beautiful and haunting at the same time. That this kind of mighty king who could defeat the whole of Troy is defeated by his wife, which I thought was interesting. But this is how I always imagine the scene in my head, and not so much weird, creepy. He looks like a big baby. Basically, it's literally nightmare fuel.
Yeah.
Anyway,
the actual his actual wife is a lot paler than the actress who was playing her.
Again, this is the slight problem. I had this problem with the Trojan women in Brooklyn. So again, there is a habit, obviously, of kind of colorblind casting, but the problem is when you do the colorblind casting combined with large family scenes. So, for example, Hecuba was white. Polydorus was white, but then some of the kids were Asian. So you don't necessarily think in your head, oh, that's the daughter of that person. So it's another barrier. It's a issue that I really find difficult because you need some of those visual clues to kind of build up an emotional bond in your head between those characters. But that was one annoying thing. I mean, this is one area where it wouldn't affect things too much, apart from Iphigenia was definitely white. And I'd say the casting for Agamemnon was great. He did look like a Grecian hero. He was very well cast.
He looked great, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my first story. So the second story, the second time round, I raced across and I wanted to see things from Hecuba's perspective. And so what I did is I went straight across to the town square and to see the run up before her daughter Polysena was strung up. And you basically see her like having a bit of a party with the daughters. And again, it's kind of it's interesting because it was kind of like the Mycenaeans are depicted as these kind of warlike, like quite party pooper people, apart from Iphigenia, who's this kind of free spirit, while the Trojans are, I would describe them like mainly dressed in like bondage gear or kind of like these kind of shiny PVC outfits and stuff like that, and they were kind of much more like they were having a drink, having a party kind of vibes. But she's basically having this kind of last drink with her kids before her daughter's killed. So then there's the daughter killing, and I kind of followed her, and I got to say it was quite disappointing. And this is again one of the problems with the format is the next 10 minutes was Hecuba just kind of going around town, sort of crying dramatically, and there's only so like when you're stuck with a character who's just sort of like acting and dancing, whatever dancing.
It's not advancing the story much.
Yeah, it's quite frustrating. But anyway, she ends up kind of making her way back home finally, and she kind of hides behind in the bedstand of the bedroom, and you see Polymestor come in, and he's brought a whole lot of jewels back, and the story of Hecuba begins with I'm going to double check his name.
It is Polymestor. Yeah.
Polymestor sending off the jewels to Thrace for safekeeping, but then he gets them back basically, and you see him returned with the jewels. And again, that's where.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, he was a really. I followed him for quite a while, and he was an interesting character in that, like part of those jewels, like he was. Like him and his whole cohort was set in like a 90s discotheque. So he's like a club owner, and when Hecuba is in his bedroom, it's like a sleazy motel room style thing. It's like got a big round bed with like a massive heart motif behind it. Lots of kind of multicolored fairy light type lighting, and a lot of the jewels he brings back are like not jewels at all. It's like he's wearing this necklace made entirely out of chains and stuff like that.
Yeah, that headdress was actually also in the exhibition at the beginning as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like they kind of made reference to the fact that it was the headdress. They'd had a full reproduction of the kind of Schliemann crown, if anyone knows what that is. Schliemann is the German archaeologist that found the ruins of Troy. And then paraded his wife around in the crown. Maybe I can get a picture of his wife wearing it, actually.
But yeah, so Hecuba's in this room with Polymestor, and it's one of the few times I actually heard them speak. She's inquiring after her son, and asking if he's safe, because there's this kind of sort of strange thing where Agamemnon, her son gets murdered basically, and he's lying to her and saying, Polymestor is saying that he's fine, and she doesn't believe him, and then she heads off basically to find out the truth. Yes, there's the crown. Which he gives to like a serving maid and then takes it back and wears it himself. This is very surreal.
Again, it's like it's quite good. Again, that's why I think again he was quite a good actor, because you could feel like his licentious nature, and he was trying to obviously like get off with the servant girl while Hecuba wasn't there and stuff like that. So again, like you can convey a surprising amount without speech actually, and again it's kind of interesting. I think one of the reasons why Punch Drunk has been so successful is that you think about it a lot after the event, and so I constantly kind of think back to different scenes and think, oh, actually this means this. Do you know what I'm saying? And slowly piece things together. That there is mystery to it. But yeah, carry on with the story, because basically I saw half of it, and then there's lots of these kind of big dance routines that they do in the club that he owns. He does this big dance with all of his family, all like his remaining girls and one of the sons. And
yes, because there's a moment
I got lost basically.
There's a moment we don't see, which is Hecuba, or that I didn't see. I don't know if you did, which is Hecuba discovering the body of Polydorus, so one of her sons who's died, who she'd previously thought was safe. Because at that point I was following Polymestor. He does this whole thing of wandering around and seeking absolution from like this nun kind of figure, and then she turns him away, and he goes back to the club and then starts his dance party basically. And then Hecuba comes in and accuses him basically. And whilst he's having this dance, he has this whole thing where Hecuba is making her way around the main dance circle, which is all, again, it's like 90s discotheque. It's like thumping club music and everyone's dancing in that kind of manner. And she gets close to him, and then so there's kind of a couple of fake outs where like the family all get really close and he falls over and stuff like that, and they help him get up the first time. And then on the final pass, as it were, after Hecuba and Polymestor have had a frank kind of discussion, a very, very quiet, frank discussion in his office, she basically puts her thumbs in his eyes and pops them out. Literally has these two prop eyeballs, which are really grim and look really realistic. And then one of the guys who was previously the DJ, who's about 6'5" and towering above everyone else, takes the eyeballs from her, puts them in a martini glass, and then eats them as part of the set. It was.
I'm so annoyed I missed that, because that sounds. Again, this is the thing. There is a definite like. I was literally in the middle of a labyrinth trying to find any kind of story at that point, and you're watching someone's eyeballs being eaten. I'm very disappointed. I missed that.
It was. I because you were there. I spotted you a couple of times, and I know you were there in part of the run up to it, and then you must have headed off basically about 30 seconds before this scene happens.
Because I thought she left, you see, and then I was like, oh, where's she gone to? And then tried to chase her down. But anyway, yeah, that was.
So she blinds him and then heads off. And the chap who eats his eyes basically gets poisoned by them. Again, there's a bit of poetic license. I don't think this actually happens in the story that his eyes are there, because in the actual myth, I think she stabs him in the eyes basically. And then Polymestor is blinded and enraged, and he gets pulled through into his office where his eyes are restored by the gods, basically, which is not something which happens, again, poetic license, etc. It's not something that happens in the actual story, because basically Agamemnon witnessed Hecuba stabbing the eyes, and then takes her away. So they go off to have the continuation of their story. But yeah, Polymestor has this whole thing where he basically gets his eyes back, and then he basically disappears for the rest of the set. He doesn't really have another role to play. He goes off. He took everyone down this one corridor that no one else kind of visits. Sort of fill it like graffiti on every surface and stuff like that. But that's about it, really.
Yes, so that was my kind of second go. It was kind of like I saw like maybe like half a story there. One thing I did notice was during the sacrifice of the daughter scene, there was a room that other people were in that I couldn't get access to. Okay. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. I need to get into this room, and this is what I'm saying about it. They're quite clever with having just these little subtle spaces that you can only access at certain times. And I ran across So again, the third time, the third cycle, I ran across and just sort of slunk by the door and waited for them to open it up. And there were two interesting characters who I saw all over the place. And inside the room was like a chessboard and depictions of hell, like from Bosch, basically. So I wondered whether these were like godlike figures or like the gods, because again, in a normal play, they're quite. It's quite easy to identify the different gods, and if you know anything about the Iliad, you know obviously like Athena, Poseidon, they all play quite a strong part in the story. So I was hoping for more depictions of them, but you don't really see them. In the Arestia, you have the Furies, which is again kind of like a minor god kind of style figure, who kind of who are all about like getting back revenge, basically. So yeah, the god. I think the kind of goddesses of revenge. They hold like fire and serpents in their hand. So I was thinking it could be those, or it could be Hades, because they had, like I said, depictions of hell and also lots of pomegranates around the place. Yeah, and I, for those who know some of the stories of Hades and Persephone, who is lured, or who's kind of sort of seduced by Hades when he convinces her to eat from a pomegranate, which then sort of locks her, and she kind of goes between Hades and the underworld and the upper world and creates spring or whatever. But anyway, so I thought it could be one of those characters, and I tried to follow the other bald guy in the play, who I think represented Hades. And what was interesting was that it was him and this like American woman in red, and they kind of appear almost like observers of the situations with what's going on. So, for example, during when Polyxena is being taken down, they kind of reenact the body being taken down themselves between the two of them. But then Hades sort of rushes off to another part, and then you see another murder. And so I tried to follow him as best as I could do, but because he literally made it really hard to follow him. He would actually hide and run off and stuff. But he seemed to turn up during all of the murders. So if you wanted to see
really, okay,
yeah, all of the murders, and on the last scene, him and the woman, unidentified woman, sort of like appear watching on from the balcony, but they were highlighted, so you could see that they were observing. So you've got this kind of like meta observance thing going on. You're watching the watchers as well. So some clever use there. What did you do for your third cycle?
So I followed Clytemnestra, and basically went back up to the hall, and they do this whole thing of the romance of her and Aegisthus, and it's really disturbing. They basically she's a bit kind of flustered and doesn't really know what to do once Agamemnon's headed off. So she's learning details of things. She's still angry at Agamemnon from the beginning, and this is probably because kind of mythologically she blames him already for the death of her first husband. But she meets this guy, Aegisthus, and they have this whole strange romance where they meet at dinner and they're at opposite ends of the table, and one of the servant girls brings in a the only way I can describe it is a plate filled with entrails. Okay, did you see this?
No, I didn't see this.
Okay.
I just want one thing I forgot to mention at the start is how effing expensive this thing is. I just wanted to bring up the cost for people to see. There's the premium tickets, which are £100 each. I managed to get some early birders last year, and that was £45 each. So this is, and it's insanely expensive. And again, like that's the price of a front row West End ticket. But we're in the middle of Woolwich here as well. So sorry, I just wanted to frame that.
So jumping back to the scene, so they have this whole thing where like they're eating this raw meat, and they're not feigning eating either. At various points in the production, various characters eat things, and they are genuinely eating things, which I thought was a nice touch. But so they're eating at the table, and then they basically go up to the entrails, and like they're bloody and it's enormous, and there's like intestines all over the place, and horrible innards, and they put on these two basically plastic suits, and like almost reminiscent of American Psycho, really. And they have this dance where they're feeding each other from this plate of entrails, and getting absolutely covered in gore, and like hanging intestines around the neck and stuff like that. And then, of course, they copulate. Basically, they have this moment where they're making out covered in blood and have sex on the table. Not actual sex, but that's the implication anyway. And then there's a lot of scenes of them plotting Agamemnon's demise and then he reappears, and then the scenes we're familiar with sort of plays out again. So I think fairly static for the third run. I think after sort of 2.25 hours of wandering around the place, my legs were hurting, etc.
Yeah, starting to get to that point. For that last time, I was trying to follow Hades, but then ended up getting lost. So I spent about the last 15 minutes just having an explore, just looking around different places. And again, you could spend an hour just looking at some of the incidental evidence. There's things like, because everything has like posters on the wall, there are like lots of kind of little bits of material culture. And again, I think that's where the whole production really shined, was in the attention to detail and the depth. And again, you could spend ages analyzing it. Like in terms of kind of creativity, it's possibly one of the better, like obviously most productions are left wing these days, and I tend to find that they are actually increasingly weaker with their ideas and their ability to kind of come up with creative ideas. But there was some decent stuff there, and some decent figurative art, etc., used in the posters. So I was genuinely impressed with that. But I mean, like they're making enough money to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think with the price of tickets and everything, it's like between £20,000 and £30,000 a show.
A night, yeah, exactly. They have a huge cast. I'll show you the cast list in a second. But anyway, that was my last time, and I guess one of the themes that they had was the idea of the labyrinth. They kind of showed various labyrinths across the place, and you could literally spend a little while kind of getting lost in the back ends of the play, and that's what I did for a little while.
Did you see Agamemnon gathering the troops? That was one thing.
No.
So there's this whole thing. Once Iphigenia has symbolically murdered Achilles, where Agamemnon returns to the tank traps, and they have this great big metal ladder, and he sits at the top of it. He climbs it, and then he sits at the top, and he basically calls the various different. There's only like 2 or 3 of them, but he calls for each of the members of his kind of crew, I suppose. And I think it's supposed to, again, be setting up that time at sea where they're becalmed and they can't go anywhere, and they're trying to decide what to do. So I thought it was quite well done. Obviously, he's up in an area where no one else can get to, looking out. So there's sort of this real thing where he feels like the captain, and everyone else is coming to his call and drawing people in. They did quite a good job with the lighting, I thought. And whilst the music was there, so for instance, whilst there's a party going on up in the main hall, Agamemnon is like dancing to that same music, but on a different floor. So he has there's a kind of synchronicity there with it, where he's going a bit mad, basically hearing the music that isn't there but is actually going on upstairs. before he makes the decision to sacrifice Iphigenia. I thought that was quite good.
That's what was going on about like the soundscape. For example, when Polydorus is sacrificed, there's a definite sound, and you can hear that in several rooms in the Troy section. So that there's kind of different sound zones that would sometimes play into each other.
The most surreal one was the opera singer who was at the top of one of the sets in that space, who, whilst various parties are going on, is singing operatically. I don't know if you saw that.
No, again, and that's it. There's a huge. Maybe I'll bring up the cast list quickly just to kind of show you just how many people are involved in this thing, because it's actually ridiculous. Maybe it's across here. Right, here we go. This is everyone involved. There's, like I said, there's about 40 people. Performing company, and it's not in order, and they don't mention anything about who plays who, which is very, very annoying. There is a series of unknown people to me. So, for example, I'm pretty sure this is Cassandra. That's one of the daughters. There she is again.
Yeah.
No, I think that's Hecuba, maybe.
Hecuba was the redhead lady.
Yeah, but who's this wearing the crown though? Because that's the again. Totally missed that scene. No idea who this guy is. Again, there was like several rooms with lots of kind of like herbalist stuff and various potions, etc. So, what was interesting was you just missed so many different bits. So I feel like I got a good idea of the major, like 3 of the major stories, but sadly, there's a lot more to see, and I think you could come back several times to
once you recover
it more. Maybe we'll talk more about that in a second. But basically, at the end, there's this kind of big climactic finale where basically all of the actors disrobed, put their clothes on the long table, and then did like a big final dance, which I found to be very, very unsettling. It was kind of well. If you're familiar with any kind of modern performance dance, it's very similar to that.
Lots of running in circles.
Yeah, exactly. And I just found that I think we're like one stage away from summoning some kind of horrific demon, basically. So that didn't like the vibes for that. But and then it ended, and people disappeared, and then we left.
I was violated by Agamemnon in his underwear.
Best, please clip that sentence and put it on Twitter.
No, so I was standing quite close to that final performance, and all the actors run around and they're like brushing their fingers and looking into the eyes of the onlooking crowd. It was quite good because they used like various characters who weren't taking part in that and some staff to move the crowd back, and at the same time the light kind of sort of expanded out, so you could see exactly where you needed to stand to be out the way, basically. And then everyone did their crazy dance at the end, and then finished. And then they left. This is the other thing. There's no encore. There's no like cheering of the cast.
Couldn't even applaud them. Applaud them. Very strange.
They just make you leave, and then they leave. That's basically the whole thing there. I get that. They must feel special for doing that, I suppose.
Well, their applause is a gigantic pile of money at the end of each night, Mark say. We've got a question from Goibnew. Apologies if I've pronounced that incorrectly. Did the modernized setting affect the play in any way? I remember a performance of Measure for Measure set post 9/11 that was immensely cringe, just basically ruined it. Mark, did you think the modernized setting affected the play?
I think it was so eclectic. There were so many different time periods that it didn't feel like it was set in any particular time period, and that helped. But you go into a play about which is a Greek tragedy, expecting kind of more Greek. So I wish they had worked some more of the kind of classical stuff in there, but I don't know if it's just, again, the novice in me, which is that I missed a load of stuff, but it felt like a lot of filler taken up moving between time periods sort of in a dramatic fashion.
Yeah. my experience with Greek tragedies set in today is that it's almost always modernized. I don't think I've ever seen a modern production where they try and recreate what it was originally like, partly because it's a very different experience. Like I said, it's not like how our theatre is today. The use of the chorus, the use of masks. Again, there is literally only 3 actors at the kind of peak, at the kind of like the last stage of Greek theatre, which again just isn't that interesting. I think so. I think it is a good idea to modernize some of these plays, not just from an accessibility perspective, but also from you can be brought into the performance more, and I think it's worth experiencing Greek theatre in its original format. But I think there is a necessity to modernize. Now the question is, does that affect the actual play itself? I think, to Mark's point, I think often people can get lost with themes and thematic and make it too cheesy, etc. There's too many like set design memes that are around there out right now, but I think a good set design / kind of general look and feel should be in keeping with a generic feel of the characters and peoples involved, but it should also act as a signpost for who people are. So again, having Agamemnon in the greatcoats was perfect, and I think that was very fitting for their kind of warlike nature. But like Hecuba was very low key, and again, all of her family, you couldn't tell they were kind of princesses or anything like that. So I feel like they could have done more to.
But at the same time, I feel like every character that you followed kind of stuck to their particular time period for most of it, at least. You know, like Agamemnon is going through things very much in the World War One kind of setting right up until the end. Hecuba and Polymestor are very much in that kind of 1910s bistro city life side of things, and I mean Hecuba was the weakest, I think, in terms of like she flitted between 3 or 4 different locations, periods of time, I suppose, but you know it was tasteful in the sense that like Iphigenia was only taken into the kind of old world kind of setting to be resurrected, and then she was definitely spending most of her time in that 1910 setting, and then her spirit goes back into sort of into the main hall for the rest of it. So I didn't feel like it wasn't massively jarring. That's what I'll say. I didn't find it jarring.
So that's hopefully a little synopsis. Like I said, I really feel like we scratched the surface with the various characters. Loads of people, like I maybe identified a quarter of the cast at the time, and maybe another couple afterwards, having reread all of the stories.
Mm-hmm.
So Mark, what was your thoughts on the play overall?
Overall, I enjoyed the experience, but I wish that I had spent more time, or it was more because I understood what was going on with Iphigenia and Agamemnon from the get-go because of the gallery pieces. Apparently, there was a second gallery that we were all kind of rushed through, or at the beginning, maybe it was the first one, where we like didn't get a few of the pieces of the puzzle. So as someone who was not that familiar with the material, I was very confused until I started piecing things together for myself in the aftermath of it. But
just on that exhibition, it is really annoying because you also, the play begins at 6:30 and you have time tickets as well, right? So you're basically missing out on play action to read the signposts, which I think is just very egregious. And my viewpoint is, again, sorry to like bring the mood down a little bit, but or the tone down. If you've ever experienced a computer game like Dark Souls for the first time, where you're basically kind of thrown into a situation, there is no guide, there is no instructions. Again, just imagine the first time you played, where maybe you didn't know much about it, people just said it was good. It was reminiscent of that experience, where it was painfully unforgiving, right? With there was no guidance as to who the people were. There was no guidance to where the best scenes were or who you should follow, and because of the lack of talking, it made it very, very difficult to understand what was going on. But at the same time, it created a mystery and an excitement that you can't get elsewhere. So there's that kind of dichotomy to it at the same time. Did you feel the same? Did you feel like it was too harsh on the audience, or yeah?
I mean, I don't think it was too harsh. It's definitely designed for repeat viewing, and of course, there's the element of because if you really wanted to, you could follow the same character 3 times in a row. I didn't feel like my time was being wasted at any point during the aside from some of the filler and some of the scenes going on too long. I never felt like there wasn't something to do, something to be watching. So in that sense, I feel like we got our money's worth in that sense. And I mean, it is fairly unforgiving, but you get used to it fairly quickly, and it goes on over such a long period of time that I didn't think it detracted that much from the overall experience.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's 3 hours, but it's basically like 2 back-to-back plays. I mean, that's the other thing. It is hot in there. You're walking around, you're sweating. It was kind of like coming out. It was kind of like coming out of a club or something like that. So your legs were hurting. You'd taken all of your coats off. You'd taken a few buttons down or whatever.
Speaking of the coats, you and I both made the mistake of carrying.
I know.
Carrying.
Yeah.
Like I was wearing a blazer, Ferro was wearing a jacket, and we both immediately disrobed of those because it was not the place to be for that. It was so hot, but it was it's quite an oppressive atmosphere in that sense. But at the same time, the darkness does mean that you get to focus on where things are being illuminated. So that it's give and take really in that sense. I think as an overall rating of the whole production, I give it eyeballs eaten out of a martini glass out of 10. And despite some of the disturbing imagery and everything else, I'm glad I went and I enjoyed my time.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that you have to be into your classics. You have to go to it wanting to explore more. Like, you shouldn't go to it like being, I heard this was interesting. You have to have that hunger and desire to get the most out of the play. Otherwise, you won't do it. I would say that if you are really into the classics, I would give it like a 4 out of 5. I did really enjoy it, but you've got to be prepared for that contemporary dance, which I find very, very annoying.
I don't want to witness anything with contemporary dance in it for about 2 years now.
Yeah, I mean that was the only acceptable format for me. Normally I absolutely hate it, but in the context of it was like acting and dance as well. Now, if they had it as like some like proper acting, like they have done in some years, it would have been so much better, and I would have way preferred it. But from what I've heard from my friends is that they found that people, again, who get lost and miss some of the plot lines then totally miss out. But again, I felt like if they just had a bit of dialogue or a couple of characters who are talking, it would have made such a difference to the experience, and made it way better. The actual kind of setting itself, like the stage production was pretty good. I would say, again, like 4 out of 5. with attention to detail, but I thought the costumes were terrible. Awful, literally awful.
Yeah.
But again, I think they like most of it's kind of like lycra and like stuff that you can dance mournfully in it. So there's that trickiness to it. So I would say, in a perfect world, they would have had some actual dialogue inside there. They would have made it a little bit clearer as to who the characters are. They should have given you like a reading list as well beforehand, just to like I said. I felt like I was I was the most well prepared person, and I felt way out of depth going into it, or like halfway through it, I'd say. And then I feel like that the price of the tickets is just too expensive. I mean, again, this is me just being
30 quid.
Yeah, maybe even 25. Considering how many people are there on a night, I mean, like, come on, guys, they're making so much cash. For 25 quid, I'd say it would be well worth the price. For an early bird ticket of 45, I think, like I said, for me specifically, I think it was worth it. But I think most other people would rather spend that on like a West End show. And for 90 quid, I definitely don't think it's worthwhile. Mark, did you actually give it a rating out of 10 apart from your eyeballs? What would you score it?
It's so hard.
You can be harsh. You can be harsh. It's okay.
I know I can be harsh, but it's like some of the stories were like really well told. I really enjoyed the Agamemnon stuff. I really enjoyed most of the Iphigenia stuff. Like the other stuff let it down for me. Apart from Polymester's demise. So I would, realistically, I'd give it a 6 out of 10. Especially taking into it, it would be a 5, considering the price and everything as well. So, really middle of the road in that sense. In terms of telling an overarching, story with all the characters and everything, overall, dead middle of the road, 5 out of 10.
Yeah. I think that's kind of fair. I personally would definitely go back again if the tickets were at the right price. They should almost have like tickets for people who've been once already or something, like a discounted. I think maybe. I mean, you can see the reviews from everyone here. It's very much like a Lovey's play as well. The stage giving it 5 stars as well. West End Best Friend 5-star, while like more normal people like Time Out, Financial Times, and Independent giving it a 4 just for its reputation alone. Like I said,
I did see a couple of reviews from theatre buffs, sort of on YouTube, etc., who definitely said that compared to their previous performances, they were a little bit disappointed. They didn't feel as immersed as sort of previous stuff. So
it's a bigger space. You see, I think it's about 50% bigger than the other places they've used beforehand, and it's the first time in that space, so I can understand. I don't know if I'll go back. It depends what their theme is in the future, but I think it was that kind of happy accident of classical. Again, I'd recommend you'd rather spend the cash somewhere else on some classic Greek theatre set traditionally. However, you cannot. No one's putting it on. This is actually the only Greek theatre in town right now. So I'd say it's running till December. So it's a very long run, which is quite cool as well. So again, maybe not something for now. You can maybe get some early bird tickets for December if you do sound interested. Or again, it's a really good experience. So if you like, if it's a choice. Yeah, if you're out of London and you're looking for a nice day out for your like dad who likes classics or something like that, it could be quite a good alternative to buying like a West End ticket to see Les Mis or something like that. That's the kind of acceptable circumstance. But outside of that, I wouldn't recommend it for non-classics nerds. Mark, any last comments on maybe like actors that you thought did a particularly good job, or anything else that you thought was particularly cool?
I think I've mentioned everything that I thought was particularly cool, but definite props go out to the actress who played Iphigenia and Agamemnon himself was standouts for me, and the guy who ate the eyeballs, of course.
Eyeball guy. Okay, cool. Well, Yeah, just for me, I really enjoyed just the various little scenes and little moments that went on. And like I said, part of the appeal of the whole system is kind of, especially for my kind of mind, I'm a bit of an investigator. I want to know more and find out the mysteries. So I would love to find out what the full cast list is, and like if someone pulled together like a best scenes, that would be great as well. But apart from that, a really interesting experience, and maybe they'll do something interesting next year instead. But Mark, thank you so much for jumping on and to talk about this. Hopefully, we'll be doing some more theatre streams in the future as stuff comes up. But any last words? Any kind of shilling for anything else that's going on in your world that you want to kind of send people across to?
Not at the moment, but I thought it was a really good time, and I look forward to going to the theatre again.
Okay, wonderful. Well, it's a relatively short one tonight, but thanks everyone for listening. Please like and subscribe the channel. It makes a big difference. Drop a comment. Maybe comment what your favourite Greek play is in chat, and I'll try have a look through. Really appreciate it. But other than that, I just want to say thanks very much, and catch you later.